We're here on a little small holding called Wawne Meadows, 4-acre small holding, very close to the River Hull, the end of Ferry Road in Wawne, which was a, well, quite derelict small farm situation for horses, lots of old buildings and things, which was since taken down. But we're here because John Nicholson got moved off where we were before, which was the Palmersfield Farm site at Woodmansea, where I'd been, because of John, I'd had the Anne Albert Foundation resident there with the caravan office and where I lived since 2006. After my son got killed, we had to move somewhere, and John thankfully gave us opportunity to move out of Tokenspire with all our baggage into his farm site at the time, for which we were very grateful, because we had a mountain of things from both from shop and offices and overseas that needed housing somewhere. So what put a stop to that was the fact that John's stepfather died, and then the whole of his estate, which included that land in Woodmansea, and we didn't know then, but this small portion of land left over from another one of their farms in Wawne was left to be distributed. And in fact, John didn't get the Palmersfield side, he was given this Wawne site. And because we had to get out in a limited amount of time, with the legalities of the changeover and everything else, and the, I think at the time the council sending their enforcement officers to come and film us or take pictures, so they knew exactly what we were doing, moving all the accoutrement of the farm, everything we have with the workshops and the materials and the expensive farm gear, all the Anne Albert stuff, massive amount of stuff, all the office, everything, including what I was using as an office then, which was my big mobile home, which I'm still using an office and living in. Because what we found when we got here, somebody had to stay on site. It wasn't our idea to start with, but we had a huge burglary within a very short time and lost thousands of pounds worth of gear, which we couldn't afford to replace, basically. And then, of course, we're desperate about all of our wildlife and desperate about the poultry. We've got chickens, ducks, chickens breeding, ducks, geese, horses. Somebody has to look after those, because in the past, those are the sort of things that are vandalised, especially what we found was whoever the thieves were messed the place up, including my caravan. In fact, chucked cocoa all over it one night, so inside. And all that means you've got to provide security. So the concept is, because John already had a place allotted, thankfully, by the council in Beverley, a bungalow, then it left me here to look after the site and still start to plan where we go with the Anne Albert Foundation, which is a big deal, because the Anne Albert Foundation, maybe the council don't know, but in the background it's been growing all the time in influence. So much so that we've now becoming a very, very strong project in West Africa. And in fact, it's taking on international proportions. So because of that, I've got to have somewhere to live and somewhere to work from. And so that's important. But in the middle of all this, I think we'd only been here weeks, and along comes the enforcement officer on behalf of the council, I think 2 or 3 visits, including a visit which says a vulnerable old man shouldn't be living in a caravan on a small holding, which I objected to because of ageism and sexism, but because I'm not. But then the welfare people were sent by the council to see whether I was in need, which clearly they said I wasn't, because I never got the report. In fact, kindly, the enforcement officer rang me and said they don't consider you a vulnerable older man. So that was good. But that's all we heard for these many months. And suddenly, 6 months, 7 months, I don't know how, it's a long time. We get what virtually is a letter to John saying, you haven't got any planning permission for any of this, and then there's a list of things. You can appeal within a fortnight or so, but you're going to have to move everything because you've built what amounts to chicken sheds and a small stable illegally. I don't know how that's against planning, because when I read about running a small holding, you don't even have to ask permission to do what's for your animals. But anyway, that was on. And then we've been doing engineering here. We haven't done any engineering at all here that I know about. We've dug a trench for what we hope will be the Yorkshire Water Board putting water into it, which you need for your animals. And so all of that was pretty upsetting, because we just want a bit of peace and a bit of common sense and a bit of dialogue that allows you to see what you can do to put this place right, because don't forget it's been derelict and we're in the process of putting it right. We've already planted 200 or 300 trees. We've already got bird feeding stations all around the place, and I've got wonderful species flying into it from the river just close by. This we wanted as an amenity for Wawne, on behalf of the kids, the school. You call it petting farms, don't you, or wildlife ponds or whatever. This is totally ideal for nurturing the wildlife that still exists on farms around Wawne. In fact, it provides an experimental model and focus for that. So are we doing wrong by planning all of that? As I read it, yes, if you start this, you're supposed to go for retrospective planning. So when you put your static caravan, which is your resource centre, the centre you need for office and security and for making your cups of tea and your meals when you're working on the farm, as I read the regulations, you're allowed 3 years to do that while you go for planning and you get everything set up and put everything right. And everything will be put right, so it's a nature oasis, it's a wildlife centre. I'm really appealing for support from anyone who wants to join all the questions about it, why it should happen, why there aren't better things to do, why we can't cooperate with the council and their advice, because we want to cooperate with things like the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, which I'm a member of, to get this as an actual on the nature map, as it were, which they're doing everywhere. We fit extremely well in with the whole concept of conservation, the whole concept of organic growing. We just fit in with it. Why can't we have help? So please help us to have some sensible dialogue and time to finish the project. Thank you.